Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are taking a hard look at literally one of the biggest myths in fitness and personal development. There is this widespread illusion out there. Honestly, it's almost treated like a sacred belief at this point, that the absolute only way to build muscle and get the physique you want is through grueling, daily suffering. We've all been sold this idea, right? The idea that if you aren't crawling out of the gym, or if you aren't training 6 days a week with maximum volume and total fatigue, well, you just aren't trying hard enough. But today, we're going to flip that on its head. We're going to explore what we'll playfully call the laziest way to build muscle and totally rethink what effective effort actually looks like.
So let's just dive right into this with a direct and maybe for some slightly uncomfortable question. Why does the guy who trains less progress more? You know exactly the guy I'm talking about at the gym. The one who only shows up like 3 times a week. He comes in, does his 5 or 6 exercises, takes his time, rests plenty between sets, and honestly, he just seems totally calm. He isn't screaming or sweating buckets. But here is the crazy paradox. That guy almost always progresses faster. He never burns out, he doesn't mysteriously disappear after 3 months, and every single month he gets a little stronger and more defined. How is it actually possible that by doing seemingly less, he is achieving so much more?
Section 1. The illusion of suffering. You know, our egos really love to play tricks on us. They completely convince us that extreme pain is just synonymous with progress, making us believe that chasing maximum fatigue is the only real path forward. Let's think about approach 1. This is the heroic path. 6 days a week, pushing for maximum fatigue every single time. You feel immensely proud of how exhausted you are, right? But the result? You're completely burned out, totally unmotivated, and probably plateaued or even injured within 3 months. Now contrast that with approach 2. 3 days a week, focusing entirely on basic movements with absolutely no fireworks. It might seem like kind of a boring path, sure, but it allows you to be remarkably consistent for 3 solid years. Real strength and a solid physique are built over years of consistency, not just a 90-day burst of chaotic enthusiasm.
Section 2. Fewer days, more growth.
Getting on board with this requires a massive shift in mindset. Training 2 or 3 times a week with complete, well-structured sessions is honestly more than enough for a natural athlete. If you take literally one thing away from this explainer, let it be this: growth happens during recovery, not during your workout. The gym is simply where you provide the stimulus to your body. Think of it like just pressing a start button. The true magic, the tissue repair, and the actual building of new muscle only happens when you are resting. Recovery isn't just some passive pause between heroic gym sessions. It's the active phase where your body actually transforms. Let's anchor this concept with a specific number: 12 to 15. That is a really solid example of the weekly hard sets you need for a major muscle group like your chest. The research is absolutely clear on this. What truly matters for growth is your total weekly volume, not how many days you actually step foot in the gym. If you do these 12 to 15 hard sets spread across 3 days, you're going to get the exact same stimulus, or arguably a much better one, than if you divided them across 6 days. The person who goes every single day usually just dilutes that same volume and adds in junk exercises that generate exhaustion, but absolutely zero extra results. Section 3. Basics beat variety. Okay, so let's talk about what you should actually do on those training days. We really need to dismantle this compulsive need for endless exercise variations just to confuse the muscle or feel super busy. These are your true allies: squats, pull-ups, presses, rows, dips, and Romanian deadlifts. Seriously, you do not need 3 different types of pull-downs or 5 obscure isolation exercises. You really only need 4 to 6 of these core compound movements. Why? Well, because they deeply activate your central nervous system and work multiple muscle groups simultaneously. A squat doesn't just train your legs, it demands core stability and total body coordination. If you get stronger at these basics week after week, your physique will inevitably change. Excessive variety is usually just chaos. It's the basics that build your foundation. Section 4. Strategic rest and optimal volume. We've all been heavily conditioned to think that a good workout means dripping with sweat, breathing super heavily, and rushing from one machine to another with barely a second to breathe. But we actually need to slow down for a second. Consider these numbers: 3 to 5 minutes. That is how long you should be resting between heavy sets. I know it sounds like you're just wasting time, but it's purely strategic. Your respiratory system might calm down in 1 minute, sure, but your central nervous system, the part that actually allows you to recruit muscle fibers and lift heavy loads, takes much longer to recover. If you start your next set with a fatigued nervous system, you're going to lift less weight, perform fewer quality reps, and ultimately reduce that growth stimulus. Resting more simply allows you to lift more. So the crucial point to remember here is this range: 10 to 20 effective sets per muscle group per week. That is your absolute optimal target. People love adding just one more set or one more finisher exercise just to reach total exhaustion. But honestly, exceeding this weekly volume generally just produces diminishing returns. You end up burning precious energy without accelerating muscle growth even a tiny bit. If you train 3 days a week, this easily translates to doing about 4 to 8 hard sets per session for a specific muscle. It's highly efficient, it's measurable, and most importantly, it's sustainable. Now, when we say hard sets, here's exactly what we mean. Leave 1 or 2 reps in reserve. You want to take the set very close to muscular failure, applying real, genuine effort, but you stop just before you physically cannot lift the bar and collapse. Doing more simply doesn't mean growing faster. Working intelligently by keeping that small reserve ensures you can progress steadily, session after session, without completely frying your central nervous system. Section 5. Light cardio and deep sleep. All right, now that the weight training is fully optimized, we have to step outside the gym. Because trust me, even the absolute best, most perfectly designed lifting program will fail completely if you ignore your lifestyle outside of it. A lot of people believe fat is only lost through severe punishment, like brutal intervals. Heavy sprints and exhausting high-intensity routines elevate systemic stress, they dramatically spike your appetite, and frankly, they tend to ruin your long-term motivation. The highly sustainable, lazy alternative? Daily walks. Going for a simple walk at a pace where you can easily hold a conversation has a super low mental load and minimal impact on your muscle recovery. Over the course of a week, these walks make an enormous difference in your caloric expenditure without ever feeling like physical torture. And this brings us to what is easily the most underrated factor of the whole shebang: 7 to 8 mandatory hours of sleep. Here's the hard truth. You can count every single gram of protein you eat and buy literally every supplement on the market, but if you're only sleeping 5 hours a night, your body enters survival mode. Chronic sleep deprivation drastically lowers testosterone, spikes your stress hormone cortisol, and brings your progress to a grinding halt. It is during deep sleep that protein synthesis and hormonal regulation actually peak. These 7 to 8 hours aren't just some optional luxury. They are the absolute non-negotiable foundation of your physical progress. Section 6. The discipline of laziness. So, what we initially called being lazy is in reality a superior, highly focused mindset. We're faced with this really great paradox. The boring path is what actually builds the physique. True discipline isn't about some chaotic burst of extreme motivation for a few weeks, absolutely killing yourself in the gym, and then quitting. True discipline is actually embracing the boredom of consistency. It's doing exactly what works week after week, month after month, year after year, without getting distracted by whatever the latest, flashiest fitness fad happens to be. Now, what's really interesting here is this concept. The laziest way doesn't mean minimum effort, it means eliminating unnecessary effort. I mean, that basically hits the nail on the head for our entire explainer today. It takes immense mental strength and discipline to stop when your ego is screaming at you to do just one more set. It takes real maturity to sit and rest for 4 full minutes instead of rushing your pace just to look busy. You're focusing your energy like a laser, entirely on the very few things that produce actual, tangible results. So, I'll leave you with a bit of a provocative thought to chew on. You now know the reality behind efficient muscle building. You've seen that rest, simplicity, and consistency absolutely triumph over chaos and chronic exhaustion. So the ball is entirely in your court. Will you keep feeding your ego on a heroic but ultimately doomed path? Or are you ready to be strategically lazy, do only what is actually necessary, and genuinely grow? Think about that before your next workout.